Today is February 24th, 2011, and we are interviewing Dick McDaniel at Communications Center at Buena Vista University. Mr. McDaniel was born on July 25th, 1925. My name is Zoey Reisdorf, and I will be interviewing along with Matt Hudnall. So we know you were drafted in 1994. How did that happen? How did that?
1944.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I graduated from high school in 43, and in July of 18 I registered, and I was an automatic deferment because Dad was on the farm, and then the Battle of the Bulge took place, and they needed some more servicemen, and I got a valuation from the draft board, and my dad was a World War I veteran, and he said, you know, I don't want you to go, but I'm not going to sign for you to stay home, because he said when it's all over, you can look anybody in the eye. You don't have to hide your face from anybody. So we didn't even fill it out. I sent it back in. Then I was eventually drafted, sent to Texas, by Tyler, Texas, for basic training, and that's where I had my infantry replacement. You know, we were referred to as cannon fodder.
How was basic training? Is there anything memorable that?
Well, it was 17 weeks. It was 3 years pushed into 17 weeks. So it was strenuous and quick and hard and fast, and to start with, we were probably preparing for service in Europe. Then while I was in Texas, along in May, I think it was, the war ended in Germany. So then everything was transferred over to training for hand-to-hand combat in the Pacific.
And you went to the Pacific, you said?
Yep.
Okay.
But thanks to Uncle Harry Truman, he dropped the atomic bomb, and we didn't have to go into the invasion of Japan, which would have been, I wouldn't be here today if we'd had it.
So you never saw combat?
Never had to see actual combat. No, thank goodness.
Yes. So, what did you feel like on the way to Japan? Like when you heard you were going to Japan?
Well, we never did. We left Portland, Oregon, went down the Columbia River and headed northwest. Of course, they don't tell you anything. We were on troop transport, and was one boy with us that had flunked out of Merchant Marines because he always got seasick. So he was acquainted a little bit, and we could see some mountains. And none of us knew where we were or what it was. Oh, he said, that looks like Diamond Head. That's Oahu, Hawaii. We pulled in and tied up, and they announced over the loudspeaker, nobody will disembark. Stay on board. We're going to take on some fresh water. 15 minutes later, they announced, they said, secure your gear. Everybody's going to get off. They took us up to 13th Replacement Depot up in the north side of Oahu, about probably 25 miles north of Honolulu. Then by that time, the war was actually over, and they started using us for replacements around the island of Oahu. A bunch of guys that had come up from down under, been in combat, but didn't have quite enough points to go home. They used us for replacement. And I was eventually assigned to the 332nd Army Postal Unit on Sand Island, which is out in the middle of Honolulu Harbor. And I spent 10 months as a guest of Uncle Sam in Hawaii.
How did you feel being in Hawaii at that time?
Well, nobody wants to be in service.
Yeah.
I was anxious to get home, but thank goodness I didn't have to have combat. So, and if you had to be in the Army or in service, where could be better than the Hawaii? I spent Christmas, we went swimming in the ocean, and New Year's. That's a far cry from being raised in northwest Iowa farm boy.
Yeah, without the snow, get the beach instead.
Well, I guess over on the island Hawaii, up in the mountains, there is some snow, but of course on Oahu there is absolutely the average temperature. They said for the year round was about 68 degrees. Now, how could you improve on that?
How did you feel when you heard about Japan surrendering?
Oh, tickled to death, because if you're going overseas as an infantry replacement, you know what you're going to face and what you're going into, and you knew from the basic training you had down in Texas, in the judo pits and so on and so forth, and you know that the Japanese were very, very skilled at judo. We didn't know nothing about it. So, no, it wasn't going to be a pleasant situation. But when you were in service and you had to go, you had to go.
While in Hawaii, did you see any or hear any remnants of what happened at Pearl Harbor?
Oh yeah, see, but it was close enough. When I was there, a friend of mine who went through basic training with me and so on and so forth, he was stationed over, when we got all split up, he was stationed over at Hickam Field in Supply, and I'd go over there and visit him, and the big hangars were all marked with machine gun fire from the Japanese strafing, and we got acquainted with some of the civilians. There was a lady, Mrs. Wilson, that worked at the Army Navy YMCA, sew on buttons, or if you know, new chevrons on you if you got a promotion. And of course she had lived through it, and her family, and so we heard a lot of first-hand accounts of what it actually was on that Sunday. But of course we had none of that, so it was all. And then down on the south corner, there was a two-man Jap submarine that had been beached down there, and we went down and looked it all over. It sat there all the time I was over there. I suppose now it's gone to scrap, but it was there where they had tried to, or probably was trying to invade, but of course they never did, because they were apprehended as they came on shore, and it was that two-man Jap sub was destroyed. But it wasn't going to be a pleasant situation if they hadn't gone ahead and dropped the atomic bomb and ended it. Thank goodness.
Before you went to war in 1944, what did you hear about what was going on over in Japan and overseas? Well,
you heard a lot of atrocities that took place, and then after I got home, I was well acquainted with a patrolman that used to be here in Storm Lake that had gone through that death march from Bataan as a young fellow, and it was terrible, the stuff that went on. And of course it wasn't too good over in Germany either. I had a good friend that was a prisoner of war in Germany, and he said, well, we didn't have anything to eat, but the guards didn't either, so it's just one of those situations. Everybody was surfing. War's never nice.
What about the war on the home front? Did you have anyone who, like friends or relatives that were in the service?
Well, I lost a good friend. He was in the Navy, way ahead of me. He was older than me. Family friend was lost in the South Pacific. See, the war started December the 7th, and I think it was in March of the next year, 4 months after the war started, his ship was sunk. He was in the Navy, and body was never recovered. So as far as he's missing in action, and of course finally he was declared dead, but there was never a body found. So it wasn't a pleasant situation for anybody.
how do you handle news like that, hearing relatives and such, or friends after passing?
You just do it. There's no alternative. You have to live with it. So it's, thank goodness I've been lucky all of this modern time now over in Afghanistan and over there. I really don't have any personal friends or any immediate family involved. I'm a life member of VFW, so I have feelings for all of them, but I'm not directly involved with anybody at the present time.
Did you know anyone involved with the atomic bomb at the time in Japan?
Not really, no. One neighbor boy, after the war was actually over, he was still was enough younger. He was just getting into the Navy when the war was over, and he was down in the Pacific when they were some of those tests, and he died fairly young. And I often wondered if there was any connection between Merlin's service in the atomic testing and his actual. I think he died by the time he was in his high 40s. Who knows? I don't.
Yeah. Do you have any opinions on the atomic bomb? That whole.
Well, it was great at the time. I wouldn't be here if it hadn't have been for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure of that. Like I said, it was the infantry replacements were considered cannon fodder. And think what it would have been to invade Japan in their homeland. They'd have fought like cornered rats.
Where were you on December 7th for the Pearl Harbor, and what were your feelings towards
Well,
that
as I remember, my folks and I had got home from church, and that was up by Rossi, and we were eating dinner when noon news. I guess it was WHO at that time. Storm Lake didn't have a station, and Spencer didn't have a station, so I guess it was probably WHO noon news broke in, and we were dumbfounded.
That's exactly something you forget, is it?
No, never will.
Of all the things that happened during the war, is there anything particular that you feel especially proud of?
Well, I did. When they called me, I went. I did what I was told. That's all. I'm proud of being an American.
Who were the Leros? Heroes. Sorry.
I don't know what you mean.
Who were the heroes? People that you specifically remember that stood out from the war, that had accomplishments?
Oh, I don't know if anybody specific. Anybody that was in combat and lived through it was a hero. Mm-hmm. And it's never going to be a pleasant experience for anybody. And I think about all those guys over there now, and they're doing what they were told, the same as we were. Anybody that doesn't think they're a hero, they're a hero just for being there.
So, after the war, when you were in Pearl, in Hawaii, what did you do over there?
Well, of course, I was in that Army postal unit, and with everybody that was still in service, there were thousands of servicemen on the island of Oahu in the Army. There was there on Sand Island. I was in the Army postal unit, and we had 2 port battalions. We had 2 ordnance outfits. We handled the mail for all of them, and the headquarters detachment, the fire department. You know, they were all servicemen. The MPs, we were all. We handled the mail for all of them. And now, one thing I remember, just before Christmas, we got the harbor master called and said that there was a Yugoslavian ship and a British ship that were coming in to Honolulu Harbor, and that there was some mail. And we went up to 15th Place Post Office with a 3/4 ton weapons carrier, and we hauled that mail down and met them down at the end of Pier 40 when that British ship came in, and those guys hadn't had any mail from home. Now this was in Christmas time after the war was over in September, but they hadn't had any mail from home in 6 months, and so we delivered the mail to those guys, and they thought we were Santa Claus, bringing them their mail, and the captain of the ship, the big wheel, the man on top, he came down and he presented. There was 4 of us, went with the weapons carrier and hauled the mail down to him, and presented us each with a 5th of sherry, the real fancy stuff from England, the kind that you take a drink today. And you take a drink of water in the morning and you're still drunk. That was quite an experience. I'd never had any English sherry. It's potent stuff. To see those guys get their mail, you know, and hadn't had any, and it was, you know, all of those are experiences you wouldn't even think of till just now. It happened to come back into mind. And I remember that Yugoslavian ship, we got within, about 200 feet. The odor was so bad that we couldn't get any. We dumped their mail and they came and got it. I have no idea what. Now the English ship, you could have ate off the deck, but that Yugoslavian ship, I don't know what was in there, but it was potent. So there was some funny stuff, you know, went on. Often wondered what that old lady that sewed on the chevrons, she was at the Army Navy YMCO, Mrs. Wilson was her name. And I bet she was, at that time she was probably 80 years old, and she spent half a day, 7 days a week down at the Army Navy Y sewing buttons or sewing chevrons or whatever. People like that, you know, I wonder. Of course she'd have to be gone by now because that was 60 years ago. But she was a enjoy to behold.
Do you have can you recall any other humorous or unusual memories from back?
Well, you know, when the war was over, there was still some training going on in the States, and some of those second lieutenants that came over, the war was over, but they came over and they were real big shots. They had their nice gold bar. They were second lieutenant, and one evening, just about dusk, came out of the PX, and a guy just ahead of me, who was a guy I knew, and he met this young second lieutenant, and he didn't salute him. In fact, he didn't see him in time, and he said, "Soldier, don't you realize that all officers must be saluted?" "Yes, sir." "I'm going to teach you a lesson right now," he said. "Salute me 50 times. So he's winging them off, and they're counting them. He got up about 35, something like that. Old Colonel Pavanka, Provost Marshal, nice old. He did a lot of umpiring of our baseball games, softball games. He came around. He said, "Lieutenant, sir, what's going on?" He said, "I'm teaching this man some military courtesy." She said, you know, it says in that book that every officer should be saluted. That's right. Carry on. They went ahead from 35 or whatever it was up to 50, and the lieutenant says, now, I bet you the next time you see me, you'll remember to salute. Old Colonel Pavanka said, Lieutenant, sir, that book you was talking about, military courtesy, every salute has to be returned. Give them back to him. And we just howled. We just laughed. I bet that poor lieutenant, I bet he never said anything about anybody saluting him again. He stood there and gave them back 50 salutes. That was funny.
You mentioned the baseball and softball games. That you
Well, see, the war was over. There was no training. We delivered the mail. It came in up to 15th Base Post Office, up by Tripper General Hospital. We'd have to make a run twice a day up there with a 3/4 ton weapons carrier and bring the mail back. By 4 o'clock, we closed our little post office. We'd do whatever. We had a Class A pass. We could do whatever we wanted to. Well, nobody had money enough to, go do a lot of things, but we'd play baseball, pitch horseshoes, shoot hoops and basketball. There was all that kind of stuff there, and we every 9 guys get together. They had a team, and I played a lot of softball and some baseball. The chaplains or one of the bigger officers would act as umpires, and we got along good because we had no reason not to. The war was over. It was so what it amounted to. I ended up with I was there from September till the next July, and so I had 10 months of R&R at Uncle Sam's expense on the island of Oahu. Couldn't have been any better.
So what else happened after the war?
Well, I don't see. We were drafted for the duration in 6 months,
Yeah.
and until they actually, when the victory in Japan, that really wasn't the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the official, and I don't know the official date of the end of World War II. So they could hold us, but there wasn't a whole lot for them to do, and they just kept guys going home, and less all the time, and finally, it was time. I left over there, and came to California. So actually, I went to California by the way of Hawaii. I shipped out of Portland, Oregon, and came back to San Francisco. Got on a troop train and went to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, got my discharge, and got on another train and came back to Storm Lake, and got off the train, and my folks and my girlfriend met me there, and I got discharged on my 21st birthday, and a month later I got married, so I was a free man for 30 days.
So being in the Postal Service, was it easier for you to stay in contact with your family? And
No, that wouldn't really make any difference, no. But it did give me a taste. Looked like that was a kind of an easy life. So then when after I got home, I farmed a while and worked at the radio station and so on and so forth, and trucked, and I got a chance to take a examination, civil service examination. I got an appointment as a rural mail carrier, and I was a rural mail carrier out of Alta for 28 years. So, and of course I'd never got that appointment if I hadn't had the service time.
Mm-hmm.
It all tied together.
Well, thank you for coming here and sharing your stories. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I don't know anything else.
All right.
No.